Hi guys, thank you for joining me for Walking with the Word. Today it's a bit different because I'm not walking, I've just been rained off and literally not had a chance to do it today. And to be honest, I've just come to realise some days I'm just going to have to do this. So please imagine me walking and walk with me in the spirit. But I realise, especially going through winter and the amount it rains in this country, I may just have to do them indoors someday. So sorry guys, but I hope the message is going to be encouraging and inspiring to you still. Today I want to talk about 3 ways in which we get rights wrong. How do we misunderstand rights and what are the implications for our relationships and our attitudes and how we understand life? So before we go headfirst into the ways we get rights wrong, let's define a right. Now a right is a freedom that exists under a particular authority. So when we say that I have a right to something, we're implicitly appealing to some kind of authority. We're saying there's something over me that gives me this right. A right is something that's given, it kind of exists in a greater context. Now typically when we talk about our rights, that would be within the legal system of a country, it could be in the certain constitution of a country, or it might just be a kind of global agreement that we have certain human rights that we're kind of assured. But whatever we ground that in, there's some kind of greater authority, and that's what it is to have a right. So how do we misunderstand rights? How do we get rights wrong? And the first way I think that we get rights wrong is we use our rights to judge, reprimand and get angry at other people. And the reason not to do that is not just for other people, it's for ourselves. Living in a headspace like that is not a nice headspace to live in. Living in a way where you use your rights to reprimand and judge and penalise and get angry at other people, it's not an enjoyable lifestyle, but it's so easy to slip into that. Let me give you an example. I think a lot of our kind of anger and upset and frustration on the roads comes from the fact that our roads are highly legislated. There's a structure and rules and regulations there to keep people safe. So if you're going down the main road, you have a right of way, and your right of way defines the fact that people shouldn't pull out in front of you, and that's for safety, right? But then there's also these kind of convenience laws as well that kind of promote good traffic flow, and when someone pulls out in front of us, it might not endanger us, but it just inconveniences us, and we still get frustrated because we have the right of way. That's what it means to have the right, okay? So when you're thinking about rights, we can kind of misuse them. I remember in Malaysia one time being really challenged by a story. Basically, I owned this tiny little car. I lived in this beautiful island called Penang in Malaysia. My missus had taken a friend back home to the airport around this island, and then she was driving along and she kind of pulled out onto the roundabouts, and obviously there's a bit more of a fluid thing going on there, so if you've driven in England and you try and drive in Malaysia, it's just a different experience, the rules are different. Anyway, cut a long story short, she had a near miss with a motorcyclist, hot day, windows open. Rather than getting angry, his response was like, woo, that was close, and he was kind of grateful to still be alive, and it just really spoke to me. I'm like, this is an interesting view of rights, and of course I'm not saying we shouldn't get angry. You know, it's really not nice when someone does something that's not right, imposes on our rights and endangers us, and I'm not promoting that kind of thing. But what I'm saying is we need to change our headspace and not use our understanding of our rights to penalise other people and push people back. A classic one in England, right? Our towns are super crowded, loads of people, not much space to park. And what you find is if you're going to visit a friend or a family member on one of these busy England streets where there's lots of people parked up, lots of houses close together, and you happen to park a bit too close to the wrong person's drive, you can almost guarantee that you'll come back to a really grumpy note just on your windows, on the window of your car, telling you off for parking there. You're too close to my drive. So people not only feel like they have a sense of rights to their own space and their drive, but also the road and pavement surrounding. They want to be able to pull out in one smooth action without having to maneuver around another car. They have that sense of that right to it, and they'll use those rights to kind of reprimand and judge other people. One time I even had a laminated note put on the windscreen of my car. Now, I'm sorry if this is challenging people, or if you're feeling like, well, actually, no, I kind of don't like it when people park close to my house. I need to be able to pull out quickly. I don't want to scrape another car. You know what? I get that. I think my challenge isn't saying who's right or wrong in this situation. Perhaps you do have a right to have a bit of space you can pull out of your drive safely. I'm not kind of adjudicating over it, but what I'm saying is I think we can get in this headspace where we live in our rights so much that we start looking for the frustrations and trying to find things to judge, and we take stresses on ourselves, and that's just not a nice place to live in, and it doesn't make the world nice for other people to live in, so try and be free of that. And the second way that we get rights wrong is we kind of conflate, we kind of merge and confuse, we push together rights and privileges, and they're actually two fundamentally different things. So I want to ask you a question. This will help you understand the difference. Do you think that I have the right to drive a Ferrari? Does Pete Tryon have the right to drive out of his house and drive up the road in a Ferrari? Just have a think about that. Do I have that right? Now, I bet some of you are thinking, yeah, you have the right, because that's a freedom, something you're allowed to do in the country. Other people are like, yeah, well, you might have the right, but you can't actually do it because you probably don't own a Ferrari. And you're right, I don't own a Ferrari, that's correct. But do I have the right? Now go back to that original definition of rights. Rights are freedoms that exist within the kind of context of a country, a kind of legal system and constitution that protect us and define our rights and freedoms. So strictly speaking, I do have the right to do it. It's a freedom, I'm allowed to do it. And were I to do that, were I to drive up the road in the Ferrari, if that did actually happen, I wouldn't be doing anything wrong or illegal. I'd have the right to do that. That doesn't mean I can do it. Why not? Because I don't own a Ferrari. So there's a difference between rights and entitlements. Although I have a right to do it, I'm not literally entitled to do it. Now this word entitlement is all about what we have our name on. Think about entitle. You put your title, your name on something. I don't own a Ferrari, so I'm not entitled to it. I have no entitlement to any Ferrari in this world because I don't have enough money to buy one. So on the one hand, it's true that I have the right to drive a Ferrari, but because I don't own one, I don't have the entitlement. So having a right to do something doesn't mean that we're also entitled to do that thing. And I think what happens is because we have rights and we see people with all sorts of cool things around us and all sorts of cool possessions, we presume that we have an entitlement and we even deserve the things, all these great things that we see around us. And that's the danger of kind of living in a consumeristic, materialistic society. We presume that just because we have rights, that means we also have entitlements and we deserve other things. But I would define those types of things as privileges. If you have a right to do something and you also own it, so you're entitled to do it, and it's a really cool thing like owning a Ferrari, then that's a privilege. And I'm not privilege shaming here. Privilege is great. There's a kind of culture of shaming privilege and resenting the rich. I don't want to get into that. Great, if you can do that. If you own a Ferrari, great, enjoy it. If you don't own a Ferrari, don't presume that just because other people do, you have a right to do that. If we view that these wonderful things that we're blessed with in life as privileges rather than things that we have a right to and we deserve, it creates an attitude of gratefulness and thankfulness and happiness when we get them, and also not resenting other people for having them. So if we can get the difference between a right and an entitlement and a privilege straight in our mind and pull those things apart, I really think that we'll be happier in life. It'll give us more fulfillment. So what's the third way in which we get rights wrong? To be honest, this is the biggest, I think it's the most profound and fundamental. The way that we can sometimes get rights wrong is we can sometimes put our rights above our responsibilities, when in reality our responsibilities should be above our rights. And I want to give you an example, right? So everyone in the world has been talking about and is fully aware of the fact there has been a global pandemic sweeping the planet, making people seriously sick and killing people. And one of the biggest changes to our rights happened this year in the UK. So one moment we had the right to go out when we want, where we want. We could go and eat in bars, restaurants, we could dance in clubs. You can just go where you want, when you want. You have loads of rights. And suddenly all those rights were completely restricted and brought down. In the space of one simple speech from our Prime Minister, the country went into a national lockdown, and the only rights that we then had were to go out and just on essential trips, so maybe to buy food, or if you're a key worker in particular professions, you're allowed to leave your house for particular reasons, and there's a small amount of exercise allowed, so you're allowed to do like very minimal things for very limited amounts of time or to very limited distances. So our rights were completely restricted. Why? Because there was a responsibility. The thing about coronavirus is, even if you don't have symptoms, you don't know if you're carrying it, and you don't know if you can make someone else sick, and if that person was sick, that virus could kill them. So there's this sense of responsibility. Our whole society, the way we do things and the whole structure of our country just changed in the course of 10 minutes, a simple speech. Everything went into lockdown. Our rights were changed because the responsibility became more important. Now, I remember someone breaking the word responsibility down to me, and I love this. Responsibility can be broken down into two parts: response, ability. your ability to respond. Suddenly, there was a need, there was a risk, there was a chance that if you got sick and got someone else sick, they could die. There became this responsibility. We had to respond as a country, we had to respond as individuals. And you know what, guys, I am so proud of how we responded as a country. I saw unity, I saw people like going out on runs and running out into the road to stay away from other people, to keep themselves and other people safe. And then I saw cars slowing down and giving those people space and saying, yep, you're on the road, but you need to be, because you need to separate yourself from other people. And we understood this, we grasped responsibility. Yet more recently, sadly, I've heard people saying, oh, I shouldn't have to wear a mask. It's my right, my body, my rights. And again, it's this thing of rights coming above responsibilities. But it's like, what if you're carrying the coronavirus? What if you like genuinely do infect someone because you're not wearing a mask and blocking the virus from leaving your body, and that goes on to kill someone? There's a responsibility there too. So we shouldn't let our rights come above our responsibilities. We live in a global community where our actions and our choices will inevitably and invariably impact other people, whether that's directly or indirectly, and that's why there is responsibility. So I've talked about 3 things that we can get wrong about our rights. And the first one is using our rights to reprimand, judge and get angry at other people. The second one is that we can confuse rights and privileges. And the third one is this idea of putting our rights above our responsibilities. And I think it needs to be the other way around. We need to have responsibility when it's called on us. But now I want to talk about viewing rights in a good way, because I think Jesus is the ultimate example of using his rights well. Jesus is the eternal glorified Son of God. Remember at the beginning I said rights exist under and within the kind of paradigm of some kind of authority structure, whether that's a legal or political authority. Our rights exist within authorities. And when you say you have rights, you're appealing to a greater authority. What's really interesting is there is no one higher than God. God is the highest authority in the universe. And there's a verse in Philippians 2 that captures it so beautifully. It says, learn from Jesus, who, although he existed in the very form of God, eternally glorified, he was with God in heaven from all eternity. The universe was created through him. Although he existed in the highest place of authority, he did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself and humbled himself, being made in the likeness of man, being found in the form of a servant. He humbled himself, becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. The ultimate example of what we do with our rights. He laid it all down, opened his arms, subjected himself to the most humble, humiliating, degrading, painful, brutal, barbaric death you can imagine. He hung on the cross, he was spat on, mocked, crowns of thorn pushed down on his head, he was poked and punched. It was just a horrible, gruesome death. He was abandoned by his friends, mocked by the Pharisees. But he opened his arms and he went through with it and he laid down his rights. What an example for us to follow. What an incredible example. God the highest, the God of the universe. This is, guys, this is one of the reasons I think Christianity is just true. It's this personal compulsion that God is really a God who leads by example and shows us what we should do with our rights. What a beautiful example of ultimate humility. Beautiful example. So when we're talking about rights and thinking about rights, think about God, think about Jesus. We have no rights before him. We cannot stand before God and claim to have any right whatsoever, because anything and everything we have, every single breath in our body, every single beat of our heart, owes its existence to him. We need to be thankful to him for every single breath. Every molecule of our body owes its existence to him. Every bit of energy we have, every skill we have, every qualification we have, every job we have, every bite of food we have, every drop of water we have, is all because God created us and created us a universe and an environment in which we can survive and thrive and be sustained and enjoy good things. And that creates such an attitude of thankfulness. Rather than standing before God and saying, that's my right, God, I deserve that, we can just be thankful to him. Guys, I have to fess up. I got really frustrated. I went out and tried to film and it started raining and I felt frustrated to God. I need to learn from this as well. I need to learn from this. I don't have a right to anything. None of us do. Not before God. Because God is the source of all good things. So we just owe our thanks and gratitude to him. Father, I pray that you'd help us to understand our rights properly. Help us to follow the example of Christ, who laid it all down for us and help us to apply that to our relationships, even in the tiny little interactions and the tiny frustrations of life, to the big things where we need to take responsibility as individuals in a society. Thank you that you set the ultimate example. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay guys, I'm going to love you and leave you now. I'll see you tomorrow. Keep tuning in for the videos. God bless you. Have a good day and bye for now.